Hello, and today we'll be playing Soulcreek Lore Drive, the Sabre War. This is another short story that covers an event in the past. It deals with Caius, who is Devonia's brother. He's the chief of a neighboring clan called the Riptide Clan, and if you read the main story, Soulcreek, you know that he despises the Zephyr technology and he wants it wiped out entirely. He believes it's bad that it corrupts the tribes and that he wants all the tribes to not rely on it, not just his tribe, but he also wants to spread his mindset to all the other tribes. He hates all the monks, and he decides to declare war on tribes that decide not to give up the Zephyr technology. So, and it ends up putting both him and his sister Dravonia, the chief of the Draconic clan, in a duel. So that's basically what it is, but we're gonna go ahead and start with the story. 18 years prior to the events of Soulcreek, Alea looked quite different. While there were four major sedentary clans, Draconic, Riptide, Windchill, and Razorback, there were also dozens of other smaller clans scattered about, numbering from 20 to 100 people. Over the next decade, these minor clans would largely either join with one of the four major clans or be destroyed. Caius had entered his fourth year as a chieftain of the Riptide clan, and that time his people experienced a life-changing upheaval in their daily lives. There was food on the table for everyone. The wardens drilled day and night, and Caius had trained nearly 600 of his people into warriors, each loyal to a fault. New buildings and farms had been constructed, and the exhausted food stores were now full to bursting with bountiful supplies for the winter. However, this prosperity had come at a cost. Every trace of the old knowledge had been gathered up and burned at Caius' command. Those who argued against the decree were given an ultimatum: cooperate or be exiled. Everyone chose the former at first. But over time, the intense labor and endless hardships of running a clan without the luxuries of surviving technology became a harsh reality. For some, it was 2 months. They yearned for heaters to ward off the winter, freezers to preserve food, plumbing to heat water, medicine to fight sickness, anything to lighten the load. But Caius allowed nothing. It was an endless cycle of work, sleep, and repeat. Such was the cost of true survival in Alea. Quality of life dipped. Some left of their own accord to either join other clans or disappear from Malaya entirely. Others attempted to utilize technology under Caius' nose. They were inevitably discovered and banished or made a tough example of. Caius never compromised. Many were feverish, loyal. Many were ferociously loyal to him and argued that a life of hardship was worth reaping the benefits of success, but even they never imagined how deep his convictions went. After the death of Alira, Caius blamed the lost knowledge of the Zephyr for suffering. It was the allure of forgotten history and ancient technology that had tempted her to coax the Black Zones into revealing its secrets, a downfall any black runner worthy of the path would warn you against. Caius knew too well that the hypnotic lure of the Black Zones was, while terrifying, it was utterly irresistible to Alea. People would continue digging in the darkness regardless of what they risked unearthing in their search for precious salvage to fawn over. Such foolish hunts would only provoke the Black Zones into tightening their noose or the clan's limited space. The willful denial of the negative one's existence only worsened the temptation. Caius knew in his heart that so long as the old knowledge was clung to, Alea's forgotten history would forever remain a dangerous allure. The clans never the clans needed to abandon the Zephyrs, because past and forge their own history through blood, sweat, and tears, but they would never do that willingly when the easier, lazier path was still out there. Christ was incidentally a hypocrite. He himself harbored intense curiosities for the Black Souls' origins and wanted to see them burn. He kept this ambition to himself as best he could, and many say his trauma over witnessing Alea's death turned his convictions quickly. Regardless of whatever intense draws the Black Souls had taken him, he buried them in the darkest recesses of his soul, an act that surely stretched him to the brink of madness. With his own clan's lust for the old knowledge stifled, Caius began to consider the rest of Alea. His fear of ferocity wouldn't allow him to tolerate any trace of the old knowledge even outside his own clan, but he wouldn't take action. Caius knew in his heart that so long as the old knowledge was clung to Alea's forgotten history would forever remain a dangerous allure. The clans needed to abandon the Zephyr's cursed past and force their own history through blood, sweat, and tears, but they would never do that willingly when the easier, lazier path was still out there. Caius was incidentally a hypocrite. He himself harbored intense curiosities for the Black Zones' origins and wanted to see them burn. He kept such ambitions to himself as best he could, and many say his drama over witnessing Alea's death turned his convictions quicker. Regardless whatever intense draw the Black Zones had taken him, he buried them in the darkest recesses of his soul, and that surely stretched him to the brink of madness. With his own clan's lust for the old knowledge stifled, Caius began to consider the rest of Alea. His fear of ferocity wouldn't allow him to tolerate any trace of the old knowledge even outside of his own clan, but he wouldn't take action. The event that pushed him over the edge came when a nomadic tribe of merchants bearing hundreds of old knowledge relics stopped by the riptide and attempted to trade their technological wares with his people. Caius peacefully but firmly dismissed them. But when this nomadic tribe saw his people's endless toiling, they sought to profit from it. After nightfall, they snuck into the riptide settlement and disturbed their wares to his weaker-willed followers right under Caius' nose, making immense gains through the secret trades. Some of the weaker Riptide clan members, their minds and muscles worn from the prospect of endless labor, fell to the temptation. When Caius discovered the deception, he was incensed. A bitter fury took hold of him, and he quickly tracked down the nomadic tribe and had his wardens drag them back to Riptide, where each one was burned alive. Though he spared his own people who traded with them, he delivered an impassioned speech that warned of suffering the same fate should the same weakness be sown again. Caius' rage still wasn't quenched. He had extracted the root these nomadic merchants had taken and took his wardens to their previous stop, the Atohi clan. They were small and had gladly adopted the old knowledge and salvage offered by these crooked merchants in their daily lives. Caius marched his wardens there personally and gave another speech to the clan, but the Atohi chieftain was foolish enough to openly mock Caius' fear for her people and Caius' own wardens, labeling them a paranoid chilla after the king. Caius grabbed the chieftain by the throat and stabbed her neck. The Atohi clan was annexed by the Riptide clan and all their technologies were burned. One of Caius' fury against Atohi and their absorption into the Riptide clan reached the Draconic quickly. Zavonia had only recently assumed control of the struggling clan, and she quickly traveled east to establish a state, fearing for her brother's sanity. After a heated confrontation, Caius admitted that he had no intention of taking his wardens any further. He had settled his score, and that was that. Zavonia left her brother to his own devices and returned home. That might have been the end of it, were it not for the Ottomans. When word of what happened to the Tohi reached them, they concluded that Kais was dangerous enough to pose a threat, so they approached Zavonia with a deal. In return for protection, the Ottomans would decorate the Draconic clan with the most advanced technology available to Alea, wonders of engineering that would transform their clan into a marvel of the old knowledge. The Draconic would flourish. Having recently suffered a severe food shortage and spent an even more challenging winter, Zavonia considered the proposal carefully. She was facing the starvation of her people, but also the vexation of her brother. Perhaps he believed when Kais committed to keeping within his own territory, he tolerated the deal. Perhaps she fully expected his wrath, but refused to let it sway her. She pondered the matter for 3 months. It's rumored that Aeon employed Zavonia to refuse the other monster. His wisdom was well regarded by the chieftain. However, an outbreak of hoof and mouth disease among the clan's livestock was the final straw. Zavonia accepted the Ottoman's proposal. Over the next month, the Draconic clan was outletted with wondrous technology to support their farming medicine to keep their people healthy, heated plumbing to keep them clean and fight off disease, electric heaters to warm their homes, light bulbs that guide them in the night, machines and materials to craft warm clothes and refurbish appliances to cook and preserve food. Life for the clan improved drastically. Exiles from other clans and even a few of their minor clans flocked to join the Draconic, and the clan quickly and easily flourished. And only amongst the Draconic had reached a level of prosperity that rivaled the Riptide clan, without the need to sacrifice their people's quality of life. In fact, the amount of labor was significantly reduced. It seemed like a no-brainer. Inevitably, Kais discovered what Zavonia had done. She had underestimated his reaction, for Kais became inflamed with her fury beyond sense. He was hurt and ashamed at what he saw as a betrayal of principles by his own flesh and blood. When he marched to the Draconic clan to implore her sister to see sense, he met his anger with cold indifference. He reminded her of the danger entailed in clinging to the legacy of Zephyr, whose world had left them in darkness, and reminded her of Alira's fate. He begged her to cut ties with the Ottomans, knowing full well that all the prosperity of the Draconic would put them in a debt they'd never be free of. Above all else, clinging to the old knowledge meant clinging to the same legacy that spawned the Black Souls, and that would spell doom for all Leia. Zavonia, indomitable as she was, dismissed his concerns. She granted her people a life previously only dreamed of. It would never take that away from them. Yes, they were indebted to the Ottomans, but it was a small price to pay in the grand scheme of things. She paid Kai's raving paranoia that using the old knowledge would provoke the Black Souls, so long as the negative ones remained inside them. What harm was there? Kais couldn't abide by it. The Draconic clan gathered nervously outside the lot hall as the siblings argued day and night. Eventually, with neither willing to compromise, Kais laid out his intentions. The Ottomans were going to scatter their technology to other clans and provoke the wrath of the Black Souls upon them all. So he would destroy them for the sake of Leia. Zavonia warned Kais that should follow through, she would honor her pact with the Ottomans and meet him in battle. When Kais eventually left his sister's clan to return home, both he and Zavonia, their clans were now on an inevitable path to war. As Sabre Kais arrived back at Riptide, he ordered his wardens to prepare for a crusade. If Leia would not bury the cursed history of its past, he would do it by force. Many would die, but that was a sacrifice that would have to be made to steal their lands away from their doomed path. The weak-willed and easily tempted had no place anymore. They had to force their own path, while Lyra's fate awaited them all. His target was the Great Barrier, and every Ottoman within it. With them dead and Leia's electricity cut off, technology would eventually be abandoned and forgotten. Many warriors from neighboring nomadic clans flocked to Kai's side and starts to believe his ideals, or perhaps they was to be on the winning side of what many already predicted would be a terrible conflict. Perhaps they even sought to earn favor with Kai's to favor to further their own ambitions. Whatever the case, Kai's never found himself lacking volunteers to join him. Livonia followed her brother's example. She called on every other clan to stand for the right to choose their own fate. Unfortunately, she faced a difficult situation. Her allies, the fewer number and the two largest clans, Windtail and Razorback, initially chose to remain out of the incoming conflict. Unlike Livonia, Caius made no effort to hide his brutal reputation. It served in his favor here, for no one was to see him on the opposite end of the battlefield. Instead, Livonia would struggle to amass an army that could compete with whatever Caius would conjure. Caius knew that he may face opposition from multiple clans, so he needed to assemble an army that would rival any Alea had seen in its known history. There was no small feat in the near Stone Age tribal society, where mass communication was a forgotten memory. He had gathered close to 1,000 warriors at his side, but they were composed of many different minor clans as well as his own Riptide forces. They lacked any semblance of order. Maneuvering and controlling such a force would be a cumbersome and difficult task. The unprecedented manner in which Caius prepared and organized his army what marked his forever as a terrifying and legendary master of war. The strategies he chose were ironically similar to how the Zephyr might organize their forces. He would inadvertently revolutionize war in Alea by creating the first military chain of command since the Cascade, a concept of war utterly lost to history until now. First, he created a front line that was 800 strong. These were the women making up the bulk of his army, which he outfitted with protective armor that his blacksmiths had worked tirelessly to craft. For these warriors, Caius chose the faster, leaner of the species, such as felines and canines. They would make up the bulk of his army and were separated into 4 divisions, each with a trusted warden at his head to distribute orders. These individual units could break off from the main army to outmaneuver and encircle, granted Caius complete flexibility in battle. They were mobile enough to be trusted to raid and pillage those clans that refused Caius's ultimatum, robbing them of their technology while forcing executing any resistance. Caius placed his second guardian, a hyena named Narva, and commanded the front line. The fastest, smallest, and most keen-sensed species, such as the avians and mustelids. They were trained to fire rapidly, accurately, and on the move. He taught them to spread themselves steadily across great distances and communicate through a code of bird calls. The fastest and most loyal of these would later be dubbed the Claws and would act as forward scouts for the army. The concept of skirmishers was nothing new to Alea. However, Caius would again break new ground with this particular group. He placed his third guardian, a fox named Hachi, in command of these scouts. The appointment was extremely well chosen, for Hachi was Black Runner. Thus Caius had created something terrifying and formidable, a division of scouts that could move through the Blackstones and strike from angles no other force could predict or match. Finally, Caius created his greatest weapon, a vanguard of 100 sock troopers composed of the largest bovines, equines, and reptilians. They had a simple role: charge in the thick of combat and wreak havoc. They were granted the greatest of weapons and the finest of armor. Each was a juggernaut in their own right, and Caius bolstered their morale with gladiatorial combat trails that ran day and night. Each warrior in the vanguard earned fame and fortune among the retired clan. They were empowered with faultless loyalty and unbreakable spirits. Caius knew that these titans alone were stronger than any army Alea had ever seen. They would terrify and obliterate the struggles of the battle lines. Never wavering or retreating, leading their vanguard would be Caius's first guardian, the barbarian rhino known as Faye. In only a year, Caius had transformed his ramshackle warriors from savage, divided tribals into a unified, disciplined army for ahead of its time, the likes of which Alea had never seen. Such a world would set a precedent for the incoming conflict and all wars to follow. Devonia knew well what her brother had created and had no hope of matching him. She lacked the numbers, the expertise, the discipline. In the year that Caius was making his preparations, Devonia was far from honor. She knew she'd never beat her brother in open battle. While she lacked his military expertise and proficiency in combat, she was dangerously cunning, deceptive, resourceful. Better yet, she knew well how to manipulate people, even the Autobots and even Caius. The Draconic army was 600 strong. Restore Caius' 1,000. Like his, it consisted of mostly Draconic warriors with spatterings of minor clans that saw Caius' ambitions what a disaster they were. The Windchill clan still refused to get involved despite Devonia's warnings that Caius would reach them eventually. The Razorback clan stood directly in Caius' path to the Great Barrier and would surely be his first target, but they remained neutral at least as far as anyone knew. Zahonia had two other resources she would utilize in the war. The first was the other monks. She opposed them while Caius busied himself in preparation and implored for them to offer what technological support they could, though the other monks were self-proclaimed pacifists who kept little in the way of weapons. Dravonia would not be left disappointed. Finally, she had her greatest asset, a young upcoming warriors who already had a legend. Dravonia had two other resources she would utilize in the war. The first was the honor monks. She approached them while Caius busied himself in preparation and implored for them to offer what technological support they could, although the other monks were self-proclaimed pacifists who kept little in the way of weapons. Dravonia would not be left disappointed. Finally, she had her greatest asset, a young upcoming warriors who also held a legendary reputation even among the Riptide clan, the infamous Badger Carmine, Taki. The first part of Caius' plans was simple. March straight for the Great Barrier, blast it to oblivion, and round up any surviving Autobots for execution. They would begin a meticulous march around Alea from clan to clan, forcibly depriving them of any surviving tech. Black runners would also have to be made to obey the new law of Alea. No sabots was to be brought out of the black zones, but that would come afterwards. Caius would have to march west along the River Quack, passing through the black zones with Hashi's guidance, then follow the river north until they reached the Great Barrier. Of course, en route to the Great Barrier was the sizable Razorback clan. They held significant numbers. Caius knew his sister was cunning in that he had to outplay her. She suspected that she already persuaded the Razorbacks to pledge themselves to her in secret. In which case, if he ignored them, they would wait until his army had marched past and strike at his rear, while Devonia's main army would hit them from the north. So here's a map. So this is the Riptide clan here. This is the Razorback clan and the Draconic clan here. Right here is a Bleakstone clan. So, well, the Riptide to get the Draconic clan, they gotta go through where the Razorback clan is first. That could give him a problem. Caius couldn't take the risk. He had to strike Razorback first and begin his crusade there, disarming them utterly and removing any threat that might pose, also driving a wedge between them and Draconic territory. And so Caius and his army departed for the Razorback clan. The village was notoriously dense, with narrow streets and tall structures several stories high. It sat at the foot of a mountain surrounded by dense forests with open glass with open grassland being the only safe approach. Most notably, the village was the only settlement that was surrounded by tough wooden walls, but the Razorbacks were very talented builders. After encamping outside of the after encamping outside on a high ground roughly a mile outside, Caius ordered Nara to march to the clan and deliver his ultimatum: surrender all traces of technology and accept annexation by the Riptide clan. Nara took one of the 200-strong frontline divisions into the village and straight to the Razorback chieftain to deliver Caius' ultimatum. As they marched through the streets, they paid no heed to the nervous Razorback tribeswomen that hid from sight within their homes. They moved with pride, emboldened by the fury and conviction of their leader, and quickly reached the hall of the Razorback chieftain, an elderly woman named Huraka. However, when Nara bellowed for Yamawa to come out and meet her, she was met with silence. In fact, the whole village was silent. Not a single Razorback clan member had emerged from their home. The streets were empty, save for Nara's warriors. Something wasn't right. Caius had attempted to outplay his sister's cunning. He failed, for Dravonia had already played her first hands before his army had even left its territory. Dravonia draws first blood. Dravonia had conspired with Huraka many months prior. The Razorbacks were not warriors and feared the upcoming war, so Dravonia had helped relocate Huraka's people safely to Draconian's territory. Those nervous Razorback eyes Nara forces had seen hiding in their homes were all, in fact, fearsome Draconian warriors that had been covertly placed here and waiting for months. When Nara's forces were lodged deep inside the village, the Draconi sprung suddenly from the dense structures and set upon their enemies. The ambush had been expertly coordinated by none other than the Badger of Carmine herself, Taki. In the following carnage, Taki met Nara in battle and, after a quick duel, killed her. Caius heard the cries of battlers and clasp of swords from outside the village. He knew that he'd been played. Caius heard the cries of battle and clasp of swords from outside the village. He knew that he'd been outplayed, and his fury blinded him utterly. He furiously and recklessly ordered his vanguard to charge into the Razorback village, slaughter everyone within, and burn it to the ground. He would lead the charge himself. It was a lesson in patience and self-control that he'd never forget, for he failed to spot where the grass had been disturbed in by sporadic digging. The vanguard was halfway across the open plains when they heard it, a loud clunk. The next second, dozens upon dozens of landmines were detonated beneath their feet. The very earth erupted as no less than 30 consecutive explosions blasted through the vanguard's charge. Many of Caius' most prized and fearsome warriors were decimated by the mines. Dozens of limbs rained from the sky. The scene was a horrific bloodbath. Many warriors attempted to drag others, crippled or outright dismembered by the explosions, to safety as even more detonations rang out among their ranks. Caius himself was caught in such an explosion, but suffered minor injuries and damage to his hearing. The vanguard scattered, retreating back to their encampments as the rest of Caius' army watched in horror. By the time the charging vanguard of 100 had retreated to the safety of their camp, only around 20 of them were still alive. And far opposite them, within the Razorback village, stood Dravonia, her finger still pressed on the trigger that detonated the mines gifted to her by the Automonks. In one swoop, she had cut down 200 of Caius' army, including Nara, and devastated Caius' invaluable vanguard. The Riptide army remained encamped outside the Razorback village for a day and night. Caius had learned his lessons. He underestimated his sister and allowed his own fury to dictate his actions. He'd never made that mistake again, though his army had been dealt a significant blow. he still had the greater numbers and the unmatched discipline that the Draconi could never outmatch. However, the Draconi army had hauled up in a Razorback settlement and turned it into a defensive bastion. They were too well entrenched. Caius had to somehow force Dravonia into an open agreement where he have the upper hand. Unfortunately, he was now facing a siege. He could try to use fire to burn the village down, but doing so would mean crossing the open grasslands again to get his ranged forces within firing distance. He wouldn't risk the possibility that more mines were laying in wait, and all the while, the Draconi would be returning fire. Eventually, the Razorbacks were legendary builders who used materials beyond wood to construct their homes. They were not at night. They were not at night easily. He could also choose to simply move on and continue towards the Great Barrier, but this was an even worse prospect. The path north was a dangerous one. He could only risk moving if he was certain there was no risk of being surrounded on the way. He had no idea how many forces Dravonia may still have up north, as he doubted her entire army was inside the Razorback settlement. His army, while formidable, but still a slow and cumbersome beast, he only be setting himself up to be attacked from the north and the south simultaneously. It seemed Dravonia had him cornered in a difficult situation. But Caius was not without his own cunning. He had a different plan, and would play the next hand in his revolutionary army, Hansi his Black Winter and the Claws. Caius' army remained encamped north of the village. Dravonia watched from the walls as they spread themselves wide, effectively encircling the village from a safe distance. However, they never attacked. Dravonia waited. She watched the fires of the Riptide army in the night. Her brother was up to something, but she didn't know what. Directly south of the Razorback settlement was something only someone as courageous as Caius could have dared hope to utilize in such a situation of Blackstone. As the moon's sun, high in the sky, a horrifying sound that shattered Draconian morale began to bellow from within it, drawing closer and closer. Hansi had taken the claws and had snuck into the black zones right behind him. They had lured a monstrously large horde of a foreign assault and now directed them straight at Dravonia's rear. The brutality that followed decimated the will of the Draconi as their fortified position was utterly overrun. The soldiers informed scaled the walls overran the village. They set upon the Draconi like mindless savage pharaohs, tearing them to pieces with their jaws and talons. 200 Draconi were slaughtered in the terrifying carnage as their position was completely swarmed. They had no idea how to fight these Informed. When they tried to cut the beasts down, the Informed would simply continue with their limbs broken, their bodies spread, a dozen arrows protruding from their flanks as they ripped their prey limb to limb. The disorganized retreat from the village that followed was a categorical disaster for Dravonia. Many Draconi were forced to flee north, where they simply approached Caius' army with arms raised in surrender. Dravonia rallied what forces she could that would fled east, whereas Taki took the bulk of the survivors back north to regroup closer to Draconian territory. Caius had dislodged the Draconian fortification without losing a single soldier. With the Informed still inside the village, he ordered the structures to be set aflame so they could be incinerated in the inferno. Satisfied, he ordered the captured Draconian to be kept alive and began his unimpeded march north, while the burning Razorback village behind him lit up the black night skies. It seemed like a fatal blow for the Draconi. Their forces were scattered, targeting Dravonia was separated by Kaiser's army with no means of communication. There were still 200 Draconic warriors waiting back at their territory, but they stood no chance against Kaiser's overpowering force that now marched unimpeded towards the Great Barrier. Taki rallied roughly 100 survivors for the informed attack. She began to lead them back north to reunite with their reserves back at Draconic territory, where she hoped that Dravonia would meet her. Dravonia, however, was trapped east of Kaiser's army. She too had rallied around 100 survivors. The situation was bleak. Dravonia had realized that her brother would never back down from his crusade and would resort to any measures to attain victory. She would have to do the same. Even though she'd been fighting for her life within the Razorback village, she had already formulated her next move. She ordered 80 of her warriors to hold their position west of the Riptide territory and wait for their orders. Then she took a small retinue of 20 and crossed the river Crike, following it north to the Great Barrier. She'd have to arrive well before Kaiser's army would, and so traveled swiftly. Taki had an army of 300. It wasn't enough. She was a great warrior, but she couldn't hope to outmatch a war legend like Caius in a battle of armies. She prepared her forces as best she could. Regardless, Caius would arrive at their location in a matter of days. Fortunately, a tremendous turning of luck was in store for the Draconi. Hadrina, chieftain of the Windchill clan, and 200 strong fighters arrived at Draconi territory ready to join forces against Caius. Hadrina had caught word of how the war was progressing, and the shocking events had finally spurred her to action. Caius still had the greater numbers by far. His army still remained powerful, even with its formidable vanguard left in tatters by the Automonk landmines. Taka and Hadrina organized their combined armies as best they could upon the high ground of an open grassland with excellent visibility. The next day, Kaiser's army arrived. They were exhausted from the march and encamped a few miles east of the Draconi Windchill army. Caius wasn't sure if Dravonia was among the army opposite him, and so couldn't afford to be reckless. He wanted his warriors well rested and the surrounding land scouted before launching an attack. He had the more powerful army. After all, he could spare all the time in the world. Taka, however, had formed a plan of her own. Meanwhile, Dravonia arrived at the Great Barrier with her small entourage of warriors. She went swiftly with the Automonks. She sent her entourage back the way they had come, to rejoin the small force that had been left by Riptide territory. She herself departed west within an hour to join Taki. Hadrina proposed a brief ceasefire to meet with Caius in no man's land. Caius quickly realized the meeting was an obnoxious waste of time, with Hadrina only pleading for Caius to see sense and abandon his foolish crusade. Caius' certitude would not be swayed. While the meeting took place, Taki had gone out alone to hunt for one of Caius' scouts. She had dyed her fur to disguise her signature markings. She found her mark quickly and quietly dispatched him. She donned the scout's armor and disguised herself as a Riptide warrior, infiltrated Caius' encampment. When night fell, she took a small glass vial from her pouch and poured contents unseen into the soldiers' drinking supply. She then escaped from the encampment completely unseen. By morning, over half of Caius' army was racked by a terrible sickness. Most were too stricken with fever to even stand, let alone fight. Caius forced those with the strength to don their armor into rank, with his Sarans doing what they could to alleviate the symptoms of their unknown ailments. Whatever poison it was, they had never encountered it before. It remains to this day a mystery exactly what Taki poisoned Caius' army with, or where she had gotten it. The substance was unlike anything any Saban had seen before. Sylvania joined the combined Winchell and Draconi army with barely a moment to spare before battle would begin. Taki had evened the playing field, but they were still outmatched. Caius played a surprise final hand in order to end the war without further bloodshed. He offered to return and 50 Draconic prisoners alive and well, and safe for Sylvania's retreat. He counted on Sylvania's duty to keep her people safe as any good chieftain should. Sylvania, despite facing almost certain defeat in an open engagement with Caius' army, refused. She openly challenged Caius to march the prisoners out into the open and behead them all personally. Surprisingly, Caius couldn't bring himself to follow through with his threats. When the war would end, he'd go on to release every prisoner regardless. A brutal exchange of range fire opened the Battle of the Barrier. As Sylvania tried to advance her archers, Caius' claws swiftly outflanked and pushed them back, with no choice but to close the distance between the armies before they lost too many to the hail of arrows. Sylvania ordered an advance. They were met by Caius' devastating countercharge, with the tiger himself at the head of his army. The clash was brutal. Caius' vanguard was only 20 strong, but they still cut their way through rank after rank of helpless warriors that scattered and broke before them. Bodies soon mounted among the armies, and discipline among the Draconic Windchill forces began to break down. Caius, however, managed to keep his army ordered even while he himself cut down dozens of enemies. Hadrina knew Caius would keep only his healthy fighters in the front line. After the poisoning, his flank and rear would be composed of sickly warriors, so she attempted a daring pincer move with her Windchill forces. Her gambit, however, was unsuccessful as Hati moved her claws to intercept. Windchill forces failed to pull off the complex maneuver, and Hadrina was met and battled by Caius' first guardian, Sve. The Rhino killed Hadrina in the following duel. Windchill morale was broken by the death of their chieftain, but Taki rallied them to her side and struck again. Picking up where Hadrina had failed, she engaged Sve herself and attempted to avenge Hadrina's death, but only managed to grievously wound the Rhino. In a frantic melee of the front lines, Caius and Sylvania met on the field of battle. It said that Caius led our hesitation and attempted to strike a fatal blow to the sister the moment he locked eyes on her. Sylvania was badly injured by Caius' axe and barely escaped with her life. The tide had quickly turned in favor of Riptide. Sylvania ordered her army to fall back. Caius allowed the retreat, so he could regather his own forces and prepare a final devastating punch that would break his opponent for good. It seemed almost certain that Caius would be victorious and Alea would fall under his control. Before the armies were re-engaged, a single Draconic messenger arrived. It was one of Sylvania's entourage that she traveled to the Great Barrier with. When the message was passed to Sylvania, she was spurred into action. She immediately called for a ceasefire and sent a message to Caius for the two of them to meet privately and either settle this matter peacefully or duel to the death. The winner would claim victory in the war, avoiding the need for further bloodshed. Caius accepted. The two siblings met in no man's land, exchanged a few words, then walked north into the thick forest. Both Draconic and Riptide scouts attempted to locate them, but failed. Instead, the two armies waited on opposite ends of the field, staring one another down for an entire night. When dawn broke, both Sylvania and Caius returned. Caius immediately ordered his forces to disband and return home. The Sabre War was over. The war had been short but completely unmatched in its brutality and revolutionary in the lethal strategies and generalship displayed by the ruthless siblings. The two of them had set a dangerous new standard for war in Alea, and others would surely follow their example. Nobody knows what really transpired between those two in the forest. Both tell that they dueled, and Dravonia was victorious. Kai's return to Riptide territory resumed furthering his clan's prosperity. He never abandoned his hatred of the Old Knowledge or the other monks, but would keep his conviction confined to his own clan. The Windchill clan never truly recovered from the war. They had lost well over half their number, as well as their chieftain. Their successor was young and lacked the experience of Adrena. To this day, the Windchill clan has yet to regain their former strength. The Razorback clan returned to their home, finding it utterly devastated by the fighting. It took many years to rebuild their village to its former glory. Even then, many claimed to hear the cries of Informed stalking through the streets at night, seeking flesh to tear apart in a mindless feral rage. Taki was celebrated as a war hero for her actions, and the badge of Carmine only grew in fame. Taki resented the attention, however, and stayed close to Dravonia's side. The Woodtire clan for a while was baffled with their leader's change of heart. Caius maintained that Dravonia had beaten him in a fair duel but spared his life. He will honor that, warning that any other Riptide warrior should do the same. Still, resentment between the draconic Riptide clans was palpable. Reading on both sides called for vengeance, even while they licked their wounds. It was a fury Caius nor Dravonia would ever be able to fully contain. Seeing the embers of the war still burning in the people's eyes 4 years later, Dravonia met with Caius. Over the next few months, the two spent an increasing amount of time with one another. Many questioned this, baffled as to why these sworn enemies would tolerate one another's company. However, in time, the siblings publicly seemed to make amends and fortified their ties as brother and sister. Eventually, it was rare that one would be seen without the other. Savonia would spend weeks with Caius at Riptide territory and would return to the Draconic clan with Caius at her side. Their bond was finalized when the drones of war echoed throughout Alea once again. The winter wailing, the Windchill clan was beset by a trio of fierce nomadic tribes that sought their valuable territory for themselves. When several Estlander gangs joined against the Windchill, Drona gathered her army to defend them, honoring the time when they themselves had once come to her aid. When she employed Caius to join forces with her, he immediately and without hesitation performed his own army once again. So it was that Draconi and Riptide, once enemies, now fought side by side against Estlanders and Nomadics. Unlike the Sabre War, the winter wailing was long. Taki further cemented her reputation as a legendary warrior by undertaking several feats of incredible heroism. Within a year, the nomadic clans were obliterated and the Estlanders driven back into the Black Zone. A celebration between the Windchill, Draconic, and Riptide clans took place in the form of a joint indulgence, featuring no less than 4 separate mating troops. In just a year, almost all bitterness between the clans had melted away. A fragile unity grew in its place. Dravonia and Caius officially declared their clans to be allies. Though they would never share the same ideas where the old knowledge was concerned, they would never raise arms against one another, nor tolerate a war of similar brutality to the Sabre War again. The questions remain. What really occurred between those two when they met on the eve of battle? Is their miraculous reconciliation genuine? Many began pondering exactly who those saber-toothed warlords really were. Was it true that they and Alira had been born south of the spine to a nomadic clan? Were they indeed the children of an Ashlander warlord that ruled far below the spine, one whose very name remained the only thing more terrifying and taboo than the Black Souls themselves? More than ever, Alea was becoming home to legends of peerless renown. Dravonia, Caius, the Badger Carmine, the Slayer, the Blind One, the Whisperer, and now the Last Human. It seemed like a dangerous collection of individuals were making their mark on Alean history. With all these powerful people in play, it seemed only a matter of time before one of them changed the fate of Alea forever. And that's all. As I said earlier, if you have questions or suggestions for what kind of lore deep dives you'd like to see next, comment down below or on Discord. This was a fun little distraction, and hopefully a few of you might get a bit extra enjoyment out of the main story from it. Peace, Ryu. I think between Javonia and Caius, when they decided to go out and duel, I didn't think they did that. I think they talked about what was happening, and Javonia convinced him to stop the war. I think that's what happened. So I don't think they really did duel each other. They talked about their past and about their Alira, I believe her name is. And I think Javonia talked him out of continuing the war. So I think that's what happened. And as brutal as Caius is, I don't think he wanted to continue the war to the point where he might end up having to kill his sister. I don't think he would ever forgive himself if he ended up doing that. So I think he just decided to stop the war because they lost a lot of people on both sides, well, all sides really, because there's 4 tribes and all the tribes were destroyed. Well, not made destroyed, but like heavily damaged. So everybody paid a cost in this war. And for a guy who does not want things to advance, he certainly did advance his tribe when it comes to strategy. Like, ever since the end of the world, basically, it's been a primitive place, and wars was done in a primitive way, but it was the first time with Caius that there were different types of people in command. You know, there was a different, there was a structure to the army, and none of the other tribes really had any structure. Like, it's basically just one position. With Caius, he decided to put all the species in different positions, and whatever strength those species have, they would have their own group. You know, some species are big and strong. They are very powerful. And you got some species that are very stealthy and fast. And so Caius ran his army according to the strength of different species and their capabilities, which is smart. So it's really in ways like what the armies used to be during the Zephyr times. Like, you got the Air Force and the Marines and the Army and all the different areas there. So while he did not like the Zephyr times, he accidentally, without him even thinking about it, brought back some of the Zephyr, the Zephyr style of warfare. So if it wasn't for that duel, Caius would have won. And while the Draconi did hold their own very well, thanks to Javonia and Taki, with her quick thinking and slyness, you know, being sly and sneaky and poisoning the Riptide clan's drinks, I think. Despite all of that, Caius was able to have the upper hand on Devonia and her clan. If it wasn't for that duel, Cars would have won. Cars and the Riptide clan would have won, and they would have set up their style of life, without the Zephyr technology. So I hope you all enjoyed this story about how the war came about and its result. Again, if you read Soulcreek, the main story, you will have heard about it, but now you get to learn more about the war in great detail. So, thank you all very much for watching. Bye.